Hey folks, my name's Ed Trevors. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Gwe. Thank you. Scott says, read the Sermon on the Mount. It helps you recognize the false prophet. This man spreads hate. Who, me? Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here. Which part of the Sermon on the Mount do you think points to me? And please don't let it be the one that says, watch out for false prophets. Sure, I could say the same thing about you, though. I could say, oh, no, look at this guy. He's a false prophet. Because it says, watch out for false prophets. So give me a specific passage that says, this guy right here, Sermon on the Mount, says so, Matthew 6:12, or whatever verse it happens to be, because he meets that qualification. Don't just let it be. For the love of God, don't just let it be, because we're supposed to watch out for false prophets. If you can do that, cool. I'd love to hear it. I have been accused of being a false prophet. I've been accused of being a false teacher. Happens. I've had it. It's happened to me before the online thing worked, and it's happened to me after the online thing has been going on. And whenever somebody presents that to me, I actually try to take it seriously. Now, don't get me wrong. There's times where somebody says, well, because false prophet, and then I don't take it seriously anymore. But when somebody says, well, because what you teach finds itself running counter to how I interpret this particular passage or how I interpret this particular piece of church tradition and history. I hear your words and my reason, my rationale, my experience with God tells me this. And then I take it seriously. So please, if you're ever out there and you say, oh, this guy's a false prophet, tell me why. Help me. Save me. Save me by showing me how I'm a false prophet, how I'm a false teacher. I would happily take it on. Absolutely. So thank you, Scott. God bless you. Scott, cool. Here it is. So Scott says you can constantly go after Donald Trump and spread hate. And if you look at the comments, those are the fruits of your labor, hatred. But you never go after the other side. Give me something. There's a reason. I'm going to talk. We're going to talk about a couple of things today that are inspired by the current president of the United States, and there's a reason for that. See, the other side don't hold their leaders up as divinely inspired. The other side's leaders don't stand up and hide. Don't stand up, do the things that they do, and hide behind a cross doing it. That's the issue with me. If he never mentioned Christianity, if he never mentioned religion, I'd have nothing to say. Right? I'd have nothing to say. Pete Hegseth is somebody that we are going to talk about today because of something that he said. And the truth is, he's kind of a shipwreck. And I use that term adequately. He's kind of a shipwreck when it comes to being a Secretary of Defense. He's a walking cluster as a Secretary of War. He's an absolute danger to the people that are serving under him. But it's his projection. It's his proclamation. I'm a Christian guy, of Christian values, and da-da-da-da-da. And yet we see none of the fruits of that labor. The people here don't hate because of anything that I've said. The people here have a deep problem, have deep concerns with the current president because of him. Don't confuse critique with spreading hate. It's not. Now, nobody forced him to be president. Every public office, every public officer is going to be critiqued by any kind of thinking, critically thinking community. They're going to be critiqued, and they get into that knowing so. Me critiquing him, me using stories about him, me using his words, his actions, his behaviors, and then finding a message for everybody else, that's not hate. That's not hate at all. And again, the people here listening to my take, Scott, if you've ever listened to any of my videos, it's something about him, right? If I'm talking about him, it's something about him, something that's happened, some piece of news, some observation, and then it's how do we take that and how do we live a better life? How do we learn from him? How do we learn? In particular, you're probably upset about this. How do we learn from his mistakes? How do we learn from him being the way he is? How do we learn from how he acts and how he behaves? And how can we avoid doing that kind of thing? What does Scripture, what does the church teach us about that kind of thing? So Scott, I'm afraid you did not. I appreciate your message. I really do. Thank God it wasn't because false teachers. But I'm also really curious. Sermon on the Mount? Where do you get Sermon on the Mount here? Anyhow, thank you. I mean it. Thank you for addressing my question. Thank you for your answer. If there's something else, happy to do it. And I know you might say, well, yeah, but it says those who cause division. I don't think I'm causing division. I think I'm observing it and I'm calling it out. I think the division, it ain't starting here. It's not starting here. I may be showing it. I may be talking about it, but it ain't starting here. Scott says, you're mocking me is hilarious, but you're the one who's looking foolish. You spread hate all the time. There's 3 of you on YouTube. There's 3 of me on YouTube? God help us all. God help us all. And I'm sorry, Scott. I'm not mocking you. I think I'm mocking the idea that we can call someone a false prophet simply because, he say bad words. He say bad words about Trump. That's not what makes a false prophet. Nor would it be somebody who says bad things about Biden. There's a lot of guys out there who've said, a lot of religious guys, a lot of people who would call themselves Christian ministers who've said things about Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever it happens to be. And Obama's a big one for them. They're not false prophets because of that. They're offering a critique, and they're allowed to offer a critique. Absolutely. I mean, we must be allowed to offer a critique, and we must be allowed to make an observation, and we must be allowed to encourage people to grow, to learn from the mistakes of others, from the behaviors and the actions of others. What isn't okay, what makes those people, in my estimation, false prophets, is because they claim God is backing a particular individual. That's the problem. That's the problem. Scott says, richest nation in the world with still people and living in tents. That's been going on since the beginning of time. Didn't Christ say feeding and caring for the homeless? Yes, he did. Absolutely. And I'm a big critique of that too. I'm a big critique of how, a big critic of how the church handles its responsibilities. And that's mainly that we haven't. We've invested much of our wealth into these things, these buildings. Scott says Trump is incredibly flawed. We've known that for decades. Okay. So you got to wear that one then. I'm going to read the next part, but let's just stop there. Trump is incredibly flawed. We've known that for decades. And you still chose him. You still put him there. And so I know David was incredibly flawed and God revered him. Maybe you forgot. No, I didn't forget. But I also know, that story doesn't just stop at David, right? You understand that. You're claiming that I'm forgetting here. You understand. Everybody, please remember, David's story doesn't end at David's death. David's story is tragic because it goes on and on and on. Go read 1st and 2nd Kings. You all know that I just finished reading 1st and 2nd Kings, so it's kind of fresh in my memory. 1 Samuel, Saul is the king. The people want a king. They put Saul in place. God chooses Saul. They put him in place. Saul turns into a bit of a maniac. God doesn't want him anymore. I'm going to put this kid David in, Jesse's kid. Yeah, Jesse's got a good kid there, David. Tiny little effeminate guy. We'll put him in power. Very good. Okay, David gets there. David's a hero. He really is. He's a hero to the people. And at this point, he is revered by God, and he has a deep relationship with God, and he has deep trust in God. It's when he gets power that David starts falling down. Now, he falls down. He sees Bathsheba. He takes Bathsheba. In order to hide that, he brings Bathsheba's husband in. Bathsheba's husband won't lay with her, and so therefore David knows he's caught. He's done something awful, and now he's caught. And so he has her husband killed. And so he murders her husband for all intents and purposes. Some things happen, but at that moment, everything falls apart. And it doesn't just fall apart for David. It falls apart for the whole flippin' country. So, Scott, I get what you're, well, yes, but God revered David. Yes. And then God punished David for his for his sin. He punished David for the things that he did wrong. And that punishment, my God, it went on and on and on. Like so that bothers me when people forget that, oh, well, there's David. Yeah, David turned into a schmuck after he got power. So what you're saying is, well, we always knew he was flawed, and then we gave him power. Yeah, David wasn't flawed, or at least Scripture doesn't say David was flawed, until he had power. So when you put an already flawed person in a place of absolute power, why would you not expect them to break even further? When a person who walked with God, talked with God, who wrote poetry and sang songs about God, a person who trusted in God, why would you believe that a person who was flawed, given power, would be somehow better when a person who was near bloody perfect when given power did break? And ended up breaking the country. David had a son. He had sons. He had a family. He had kids. Well, before his death, his kids rebelled against him. Civil war. Yeah, the perfect guy. Sin breaks him after getting power. Civil war. Shatters the country. David wins a civil war, loses family. Before his death, makes Solomon, the king. Solomon's this great, wonderful guy. God reveres him too. Oh, I love your answer, Solomon. I'll give you riches, or I'll give you power. What is it? I'll give you riches or power. And he says, no, give me wisdom, man. Give me wisdom. I want wisdom, because if I have wisdom, I can lead your people better. And God goes, I love that answer. And so here you go. I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you everything you could possibly ask for. Just do one thing. Just, try to keep the marriages within the country. That doesn't last very long. Solomon does really horrible things. And we don't see it this way, but Solomon enslaved his own people. The son of the revered one, enslaves his own people. And his people hate it. And when Solomon dies and his son comes along and they go to his son and they say, hey man, can you lighten up? Your dad was pretty cruel to us. And he says, absolutely not. If you think my dad was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. And then what happens? The country splits. It's now Judah. It's now Judah and Israel. Country splits. David's grandson splits the country. And it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until finally both nations are conquered by the Persians. Both countries are conquered by the Persians. So please, don't drop that David was incredibly flawed and God revered him on me. I know how it ends. You should know how it ends. David was incredibly flawed. After he got power, he was incredibly flawed. After he got power, he sinned mightily. Many transgressions. After he got power. Well, dear Lord in heaven, what did you think would happen when you put a person in power who was already deeply flawed, as you point out? You think they're going to, they're just going to start wearing their halo? Come on, man. It doesn't work that way. That's not how humans operate. Sorry, everybody. That was my rant of the day. So, again, Scott, thank you very much. God bless you. Appreciate it.